Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's NETA webinar with City Council President Ed Flynn. I want to welcome you all today and thank all of you for joining us, and thank you all for your continued support and participation of these webinars during the pandemic. I've been receiving invitations to various events, and it seems that people are having more in-person events in March and April. And so I will be considering, when we go back to the in-person events, the breakfast and lunch that we've had for over 20 years here at NETA. So we'll do probably a few more webinars, and then we may go back to in-person events. It would be good to see everybody. I want to thank my partners here at NETA and the staff, and my assistant Julie, and Jay Wagger and Colleen Biggood for helping always put these together. And I want to thank all of you who continue to support these. I did want to welcome a person who's joined us for the first time today. We have a new district attorney in Suffolk County, as you know, a very important job. And I want to welcome, who's on the line, District Attorney Kevin Hayden. And I want to welcome the DA and congratulate you for your appointment, and best wishes to you as you undertake a very important job to the quality of life here in Suffolk County. And Council President Flynn, I want to congratulate you on your re-election to the council, and congratulate you on your election by your peers as Council President. So welcome, Council President, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with your law firm, and I'm honored to be here to talk to you and your guests as well. And I've always enjoyed coming in person and also over Zoom the last several years to these monthly events. So just appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, Bill.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to, before I forget, I'd like to extend my greetings to your parents, Council President. Please say hello to your mother and father for me. I saw them at the library in Southie back in the fall, and I was thinking of your father today. I was listening to sports radio, and they were talking about the great Providence game last night, and double overtime or triple overtime and against Xavier. And of course, I think of all the Providence graduates that I know, and your father, of course, had a great career at Providence. And for those on the line, we have we do have a wide range of people, Mr. President, age-wise and occupation-wise. And for some of the younger folks, the Council President's father, Raymond Flynn, of course, was the ambassador to the Vatican, was the mayor of the city of Boston, a member of the city council, a state representative, and of course was an outstanding basketball player at Providence College in the late in the 50s, and it's a great public servant. And the council president has continued that tradition of public service that's in the Flynn family. So welcome. I got to tell you the truth. As I thought about our conversation, the amount of issues that have been popping up and have intersected, Mr. President, are many. And so I'm just going to give you some broad questions for you to sort of give us a context for your leadership and your service as president. You're a lifelong resident of South Boston and the city, and member of a politically active family, and you've been a councilor from District 2, which is South Boston, Chinatown, portions of the South End, and portions of the downtown. How has the city changed in your perspective in your lifetime, and how is it the same, and how are the neighborhoods different? In my lifetime as a Dorchester guy, I've seen the city change tremendously. How have you seen it, and what have you noticed about the change that you think are important?
Yeah, that's a great question to start at, is, the changing Boston. And what I've noticed the most, Bill, is, the the city relies on the business community in the hospitals and colleges and universities, the high-tech companies as well. They play a critical role in our city, but the workers that are coming into Boston, into those jobs, are staying in the city. And they're putting down roots here in various neighborhoods. So we have a much younger city, a highly educated city. And with the price of housing also, it can be difficult for longtime residents to stay in the city. So we've seen a lot of residents move to the South Shore or to the North Shore, but in the city itself, it's changing dramatically, and it's a lot of recent college graduates and many immigrants as well coming to Boston, coming to the United States for work, for training, for educational experiences. So it's a city that's always changing, and it's a welcoming city, and we're also proud of our immigrant roots here in Boston's neighborhoods as well.
As you know, like all issues, there's a flip side to it. Do you see that energy, that growth, the property values, that there is, that some folks are being forced to leave, or maybe they're taking advantage of the increase in property values and selling or moving and so forth. So, but do you see what we have to be wary of as we celebrate the good stuff, that we have to be sure that we don't lose certain traditions or certain things that we have come to rely upon in the city?
Yeah, that's important to acknowledge and to recognize that, traditional neighborhoods are not as prevalent or prominent anymore. And because of the high cost of housing, a lot of residents have left. We do have a school system as well that is struggling. A lot of young families don't have that same confidence level in the Boston public schools. We are making improvements. There's more work to be done, but a lot of young families don't have that confidence and leave at a certain point in their life for a system outside of Boston that works better across Greater Boston. But we have lost that traditional neighborhood ethnic feel of the city. But what I'm focused on is the housing issues, is trying to have more affordable housing, but also workforce housing for young families that want to stay in the city, to continue to stay in the city. But we also have to address that we have significant challenges in the Boston public school system. And we are obviously going through a new superintendent change right now, but we have a lot of work to do, Bill.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I'm going to have is about BPS, but I'll raise it now. I'll raise it in this context. Do you still see a couple get married and they buy a condo or a house in Southie or Dorchester, wherever, but when the child reaches school age, maybe they go to the local school, maybe it's the Catholic school or the public school near me, but at some point, because of the schools, they decide to move on into a suburban town. Do you still see that throughout the city?
Unfortunately, we do see that. The private schools work well. The Catholic parochial schools work well. There are many good schools also in the Boston public school system, but not all of them. We need to work harder and smarter to make sure every school in the city is a good school. Just as an example, my son went to public school his whole life. He started off at the Josiah Quincy School in Chinatown public school, and that's an excellent program, excellent academic program. And he was he took the examination for Boston Latin, was able to get into Boston Latin from Josiah Quincy. But we need to make sure every public school in the city is as good as the Josiah Quincy School or the Murphy School or the Perry School. Our teachers are doing a good job. Our parents are doing the best they can. We also have to make sure that we provide our students with as much after-school activities, homework assistance, tutoring, food assistance. But we have to address the overall challenges that our BPS families are facing. And many of them are immigrant families, and many of them are children with special needs as well.
The leadership of the BPS, Superintendent Casalius, ends in June. There's been a lack of stability in the leadership of the system. I just don't, I don't have a sense of is how important that is as a superintendent, but again, the search is on. And so what is your sense of that position and its importance? And I hear people talk about, why do we go to a nationwide search? Aren't there people here in the BPS who are familiar with the school system, know its pros, know its cons, and could do a good job? How do you feel about the profile of that person, do you think, that could be the next leader of the school system and address some of the issues that you just mentioned?
I was on a meeting last night on Zoom, Bill, listening to the meeting. It was a BPS meeting about this issue. But what I would like to see is certainly a nationwide search for a superintendent. But I think it's important that we look closer and closely here in Boston, whether it's at the BPS system or in and around our colleges and universities. These colleges and universities, their graduate programs and their doctorate programs are educating leaders in school systems across the country to receive that degree. But I think it's important to the next superintendent to know about the neighborhoods of the city, to have a feel of the city, understand the challenges, what works well in one neighborhood might not work well in another neighborhood. You have to understand the history of Boston, the challenges we face as a city, and also have the contacts already established, I think is important. The business community can play a critical role in the success of the Boston public school system. I know the business community is active and involved in the school system in a positive way. I hope that will continue. I'm sure it will. But I do think it's important that the next superintendent knows about Boston, knows the people, knows the challenges, and knows how to deal with very difficult political issues, because, Bill, it's not only an educational job, it's a political job as well, as you know.
That's why I often thought, I'm involved in a college search right now for a new president. And an issue that I have in my own mind is it merely an academic or a non-traditional candidate? And I even wonder about the Boston Public Schools. Does it have to be someone who, is strictly in education, or does a non-traditional candidate from an organization or an institution, could they fit the bill as well? So be interested to see who's interested in it, but it may not have to be just someone who's been in the confines of a school system, because you describe a job that a lot of folks may not know the breadth of it and so forth, and it's important. I do have a question about, what do you think? I have a question about COVID-19, but COVID-19's impact on the schools, since we're talking about the schools, on the school system. And there's been an impact on the children, on the teachers, on the families, trying to rebound now. What has it been, and how do we do it, Council President?
It's been a very difficult year for BPS but for BPS families, many of the families in our school system receive food assistance in regarding the public school system for various social services. Some of that was impacted during the pandemic, but we worked to get them as much services as we could. But know what really the major problem was, Bill, is the mental health challenges our students are facing now, but also their parents as well. And again, many of them are immigrant families. And we need to have a better system in place to deal with the overall BPS family, providing them with the social services and programs that they need. It's not just good enough to educate the child from 8 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. It takes an entire city, entire neighborhood to work with that BPS family 24 hours a day, basically 7 days a week. And that includes food access, that includes mental health counseling. Sports programs are critical. After school programs are important. Mental health counseling, certainly. But we have a lot of work to do. We're going into the budget process now, and that's what I'm focused on, is making sure that the services are available for our children. And that includes social workers in the school, assistance to a lot of these families as well, in their community, in their neighborhood.
Well, the mental health issue, even at the college level, the students, the issues of mental health and behavioral health are just so dire. These kids need help, and it's a big issue. And even interviewing some candidates, they've talked about the need for that. So it's an issue across the board. And as you know, the state has put a lot of money with the ARPA funds into mental and behavioral health, just to address the issues that you've talked about, because the issue is so prevalent. The issue is so prevalent. We have a new mayor. We have a change in the membership of the council. And now you've been re-elected and returned and elected as president. What is your agenda as president of the council? How do you plan to lead the council, interact with the new administration, have the council interact with the new administration? You mentioned the budget. I know there's an interest there. But could you just give us a sense of how you would like to lead the city council in a changing city, as you mentioned, but also particular leadership at the mayor's office and with your colleagues?
I started in the city council 4 years ago, and Councilor Wu, now Mayor Wu, but Councilor Wu was my colleague on the council for 4 years, and I had a very good personal and working relationship with her, and I'm fortunate for that. We also just elected the most diverse Boston City Council in the history of Boston. And so people have asked the question, they have the most diverse Boston City Council, and why were you elected president to lead the most diverse body, or what is your plan now that you are elected? And I didn't come up with a reason to a list of policy issues I want to solve. What I want to do, Bill, is I want to work with the city administration, with my colleagues in government. I served 25 years, as you know, in the U.S. Navy, overseas, and active duty in the reserves. But it's about leadership, and it's about accountability, working hard, paying attention to the small details. And I think that's what I bring to the table, is positive leadership, bringing the best out of people in government, encouraging people to do the right thing, to work together. And I'm probably not helping myself by saying I don't have a list of major policy issues I want to deal with, but I want to just try to be the best city council president I can and bring out the best in city leaders and city departments. And that's about working hard, working together, listening to residents, listening to the business community, understanding the challenges we have as a city. But the important part is bringing people together, listening to people, and coming up with solutions that can work. So that's really what I hope to accomplish over the next 2 years.
Well, a lot of the individual councils, of course, do have agendas that they were elected on, many for the first time. And there are many who want the role of a city councilor to be more engaged. I'll say not just to fix potholes, I'll use that, but to be more engaged in policy. And the budget is one. You mentioned the budget a few minutes ago, and you're having sessions around the city. You've had some already, and you have others. But could you talk about that? And also, there was a ballot question that gives the city council members more involvement in the budget that was accepted. So could you describe that a little bit for me in terms of the budget and how you see the city council's involvement in that?
Yeah, this is the first year that the city council is playing a real hands-on leadership role on the budget. And that was due to a ballot initiative that was passed by the residents that gave more action and influence to the city council and to the residents, a participatory budget. The city council is working with Mayor Wu in terms of, we're doing listening sessions. We had one last night and we have one tomorrow, I believe. And residents are able to weigh in about the budget and recommend what should be in there, and many recommend what shouldn't be in there. But there's a huge role for the city council. There's a huge role for residents as well. But my final point on this is the budget. It has to be a strong budget for city services, quality of life issues, the nuts and bolts of city government are also important. Certainly we have our challenges in the school system and with housing, but we also need to make sure that the roads are fixed and the potholes are fixed and water and sewer issues are addressed and pest control is addressed. But it's those nuts and bolts issues that the city traditionally focuses on. We can't lose focus of that as we discuss big policy items, and we have room to do both. We have room to talk about big policy items, but I'm going to make sure that we don't lose focus on the nuts and bolts of city government, quality of life issues, making sure government works for the residents. Bill, the residents are paying high property taxes. Businesses are paying high property taxes. For a lot of residents that live in the city, they're retired. They may have a retirement for $50,000, $60,000. They live in a house that's worth $1 million. It doesn't mean they're wealthy people. It probably means that they're barely making it to live in the city, and they can't afford these high property taxes. So we have a lot of work to do. We need to make sure that we look at the property tax issue and allow longtime residents that have been here that have helped build this city. We don't want to be pushing them out, but we need to make sure Boston is working for everybody as well.
Well, I shared with you an article that was in last week's Bond Buy, which is a municipal finance. And there's an article in there about the tax future is unclear for cities. And what the article is about is because of the vacancy downtown, a lot of the big taxpayers are, the big commercial business taxpayers are hurting, and there could be a lack of revenue coming into the city. And as you know, we depend on those big commercial payers. A utility, for instance, is one of the biggest payers in the city. and so forth. So we depend on a strong commercial base, and that has been hurt as a result of the pandemic. And if we can't cover it there, it's going to go to the residents. So you are right about the need for a strong base as well as the residents. You have been a district councilor. You represent diverse areas, Southeast to Chinatown to South End. And now you have citywide responsibilities as far as your leadership. How have you thought about that? That you continue to, be a counselor, but now you have to be, I'm not saying you were never concerned, but you have to be more concerned when a counselor from another part of the city says, this is important to me. This is important to my district. How do you plan to sort of respond to that?
Well, it's a great question. You don't have the luxury to pick and choose what issues you want to work on. You don't have the luxury to pick and choose the people you want to work with. So you deal with the issues that come forward to you. But what I've focused on is understanding the different neighborhoods in the city, what they bring to the table, what their significance is in terms of, parks or nonprofits in the area. But each neighborhood in each district is different, and it takes a while to learn about the district, but it's important to learn from your district councilors on what issues are important to them, how you can work closely with district councilors to resolve issues with the city administration, working closely with Mayor Wu. As I mentioned, I have a very positive working relationship. But each neighborhood is different, and the challenges are different. I represent the wealthiest district in the city, and probably the poorest area in the city as well. Chinatown has the highest level of poverty. So you do your best to work closely with the residents and to provide the best positive leadership you can to make sure that Boston is working for everybody, but especially people in the neighborhoods that are struggling. We want to make sure that they have the city services and support in place so that they can be successful and that they can raise a family here in the city.
The Latin school issue, I think, is an important one. That some people are concerned about, who intended their child to have a chance to go there, who now may feel they don't. And my view is there should be more Latin schools, not fewer. And it's just an issue that I think could be important the impact of it could be important in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the city of Boston focused a lot of energy and resources over the last several years on that Latin school debate, but you are right. We want to make sure every high school is as good as Boston Latin or Boston Latin Academy or the O'Brien School of Math and Sciences.
Yeah.
So we want the high schools in Boston are struggling. That's why it takes all of us to work together to bring them up. Madison Park vocational program, it should be the best vocational high school in the country practically, and it's doing very poorly, unfortunately. You hate to say that about a high school. The vocational program in Worcester High School is doing exceptionally well, but there's no reason that Madison Park is not doing well in vocational and technical training. But the business community, our building trades, colleges and universities and hospitals can play a leading role in making sure Madison Park is the best vocational program available.
And what's missing, and this is not a city issue, but what's city of Boston school issue, but what's missing today in the city is there are fewer choices for high school for kids. And what I mean by that is there's no more Don Boscos. There's no more Christopher Columbuses where I went. There's no more, St. Gregory's or Cardinal Cushing's. where, as you know, our families and friends went to if they didn't go to public school, and those are now closed. And those opportunities don't exist either. So there aren't many choices, which is too bad. There aren't many choices. The other issue, big issue, of course, is the commissioner of the Boston Police Department. And again, we can get into the whole discussion of defunding the police, public safety generally in the city, leadership at the police department. But we have come along, you and I, with strong police commissioners. When you look who we have had, from the Evans brothers to folks along the way, and going back to Bill Bratton, who grew up in my neighborhood. So there's now a vacancy. What is your sense of the search of the new commissioner and just generally the police department as you get into the budget season?
Yeah, the police play a critical role in our neighborhoods. I attend many neighborhood meetings at night, and the first person that actually speaks at the neighborhood meeting is usually the police captain, and he kind of gives a update on what's happening in the neighborhood. In 4 years listening to these captains, and I usually speak after, not one resident has ever said that they want less police in the city, that we need to cut the police in the city. And again, I represent South Boston, the South End, Chinatown, Bay Village, Back Bay, Beacon Hill, all of the waterfront, Seaport. Residents are actually asking for more police in the neighborhoods. They know the critical role police play, and I know the critical role they play in our neighborhoods. So we need more police in the neighborhoods, not less. We need to consistently hire 250, at least 250 police officers a year, probably for the next 10 years, because a lot of police are retiring now, and the manning levels are not there for us. Our police are also burnt out, but we need to support the police. We need to support community policing, work with the residents. Certainly we need to make some changes, but the role of the police is critical in our neighborhoods on quality of life issues. As we discuss the search for a new police commissioner, I think the police commissioner should come from the Boston Police Department. I know the captains in the Boston Police. I know them well. They're exceptional. I think it's very challenging for a new person to come into the city to run the City of Boston Police Department if you don't have an understanding of the people, the history, the department itself, the City of Boston. So I think we can hire from within, and I think the residents would be mostly satisfied if that were the case, because the residents like the police, they know the police, and they know the critical role they play. So I'm working to try to see having the next police commissioner come from the ranks. I think that's important. Not sure if that will take place, but that's a recommendation I have made.
You mentioned that the concept of community policing. Just as an FYI, I just read several months ago the new book by the former commissioner Bill Bratton, and it's called The Profession. Mm-hmm. And of course, he was at the forefront of community policing. Then he brought that to New York, he brought it to California, to LA, and also the broken window theory by Professor Wilson. Both issues make great sense here in the city, that we have to respond, that if you don't respond to things in the community, they only get worse. And so I agree with your community policing, knowing who's up on Broadway, who lives down the street, who's hanging around here and there, I think is very much important. The COVID pandemic Mr. President. It's a broad issue, but just if you could identify certain issues that you dealt with or that you learned from COVID-19. I'd like you to, have we used the ARPA funds well? The policy on masks and vaccines, there's a lot in there. And the big one, of course, is how are we going to recover and rebound? I know you talked about the downtown. It's a lot in this question, a lot in this topic, and I want you to pick and choose in it. But how do we help our small businesses? You talked about families, but just what do you think has been the impact on the city, and how do you see us rising from it?
Yeah, I think the city has challenges going forward, but I'm confident if we work together, we can solve them. But it's going to take discipline. It's going to take hard work, accountability. I think I know we have strong leadership from Mayor Wu. We also need to work closely with the business community, with our nonprofits, colleges, universities, hospitals, to support our businesses that have been struggling. They hire so many people and contribute greatly to the economy. But our small businesses especially are struggling. Many of them are women-owned, many of them are immigrant-owned. They need financial support through grants. We also want to see if federal funds can continue to be helpful. I know the city and state has been working with small businesses, but we need to be more pro-business in Greater Boston in helping businesses get back on their feet. It's been a very difficult period for them and for their workers. But, I also think, Bill, there are no easy answers. And as a city and as a community, as a state, we're going to have to show more discipline in a sense of working together and not be as critical to each other, and be more welcoming and understanding and working with people and on issues that we may not feel comfortable doing. But I think we have to get out of our comfort level and support each other during this difficult time. And that also includes accountability on everyone's behalf and being responsible for our actions as well.
Do you think the ARPA funds have been spent well and as you thought they should be, or?
I think they have. They've supported people and families during these difficult times. And we're fortunate to have strong, positive leadership in Congress, especially from Congressman Lynch, who's a neighbor of mine in South Boston. So I have the opportunity to work with him almost every week. We had problems in our nursing homes throughout this pandemic, and working with the congressman and elected officials, South Boston elected officials too, we were able to get the National Guard playing a critical role in many of these nursing homes, whether it was with testing or it was vaccination, food access. So the federal role in our city is critical. Also want to acknowledge the two senators as well, Senator Warren and Markey, Congresswoman Presley. It's about working together, city, state, and federal government working together, solving problems. You don't need to look for any credit. The only credit you need is making sure that the residents are helped, families are helped. We get people back on their off from the ground and on their feet. That's what's important, making Boston a welcoming place, keeping the city moving forward during this difficult period of time.
One issue that, of course, got tremendous attention, and it is an issue and also encapsulate other issues, was under the heading of mass and CAS. But the housing issue the addiction and recovery issues, the mental health issues, behavioral health issues, homelessness. They all were concentrated there at that time, and for you, was that a surprise, or that was brought about by COVID, or was it just brought to our attention by COVID, by the pandemic?
Well, prior to becoming a city councilor, I was a probation officer at Suffolk Superior Court, and I worked with the homeless community that was on probation. I was a probation officer when Mayor Walsh had to shut down the Long Island Bridge because it was practically falling into the ocean. When that happened, the homeless community from Long Island pretty much moved into the Mass and Cass area. But what we also found out, Bill, is I knew this as a probation officer. I would have 70 people on probation, homeless people on probation. About 60 out of the 70 committed their initial offense in Superior Court outside of Suffolk Superior Court. So basically, they're coming to Boston to get services, including transfer of their supervision of probation. So Boston inherited a lot of people coming to the city in search of housing. Some were involved in the criminal justice system, some weren't, but others were looking for medical care, housing, stability, social services. Others were looking to Mass and Cass for drug use, unfortunately. But I think Boston is no longer able to accept everybody that wants to come here looking for social services. We're compassionate people. We care about the homeless community, but I just don't think we're able to support every single person that comes to Boston looking for housing or looking for social services. The role of cities and towns across the state has to be addressed, and cities and towns across literally New England can't just dump their problems on the city of Boston. I don't mean to be crass in saying that or disrespectful in saying that, but Boston can only do so much to help residents in need, and it's time for other cities and towns across New England to do their part as well.
Do you think that the response to Mass and Cass is only a short-term, not a long-term response, and we have to think about the longer term? I know there's been an immediate response, and there's housing out at the Shattuck now. They put up, modular housing and things like that, and so forth. But those are only kind of short-term measures. I don't think those are long-term measures.
Yeah, the long-term measures are getting people into drug treatment programs, and it starts with detox, but it also starts at getting them into a recovery program. Short-term and long-term, getting them the training and job training experience so that they can eventually get a job and have an apartment. It's very difficult to do that in this city with the price of housing. But when people come to Mass and Cass, and then we get them into a drug treatment program and into a recovery program, at that point, they will be successful or more successful being in their own community. So that's why it's important for cities and towns to invest in housing in their communities, low-income housing or workforce housing, traditional housing that we have here in Boston. Each city must do their part.
Next issue, it's a big issue for the city, and I'm sitting in the middle of it, which is development. As you know, development. What are the development issues as you see it facing the city today? Is it too much? Is there a lack of planning? what do you think of the transfer fee that is up before the legislature to raise funds there? Could you talk a little bit? Your district is, right in the thick of things when it comes to development, and down here in the Seaport, as you know, where I'm sitting in, and the lab stuff now is as hot as a pistol in terms of the growth of lab space, and the companies still want to come here, and we saw that in today's paper. Another company on Necco Street. So how do you envision the city working with the developers and the companies that want to come, create jobs, create revenue, which is a good thing, but yet there are some concerns people have?
That's right. There are concerns residents have, and that's mostly with the development process, the community process. Certainly, we respect the community process in making sure residents, that their voices are heard during the development process. But what's also important to know is Boston can't stand still. We have to continue development, because as I mentioned earlier, Bill, it's development that is paying for our schools, for our parks, for our youth sports programs, for our social workers. Development plays a critical role in the city. 52% of economic development that's happening now in the city of Boston is happening in my district, in District 2. I have to be at the BPDA board and the ZBA in weighing in on development proposals. It's my job to work with the development team and the residents and city officials to ensure that the process is fair, the project is good, it benefits the city, and there's an opportunity for people to get good paying jobs, whether that's at the construction site or because of these emerging technologies that are coming into the city, such as life sciences. I have 30 proposals in District 2 alone on life sciences. I think the city needs to do a better job of explaining life sciences to residents. I don't think we've done that. I think we can do a better job of educating people on the critical role of biotech, life sciences, the role they play, but also how it can help residents, how it can help BPS students. Are they able to get the opportunities to internship? Will these life sciences help our BPS with the STEM program, with math and science and technology and engineering? So as we welcome life sciences into the city, what I also want to make sure is that residents, especially our young people, children, are studying at the earliest ages on STEM, math and sciences. But development is critical for our city. We can't slow down development. And if the development community has any challenges and issues, they can always reach out to me if there's something I can do to be helpful. So I'm glad you asked that question, Bill.
You made a comment, and it's a point that I wanted to raise. I had it under the heading of economic competitiveness, and how does the city continue to attract and retain businesses or new businesses? You referred to it, but that's a constant challenge. Even with the lab space, how long will that continue? Right now we're known for having brain power and well-educated workforce, and even though the pandemic may change that in terms of where people have to be, but how do you see the city maintaining that competitiveness? And is it by the development deals? Is it by the workforce? Is it by the accommodations we make? How do we do that, do you think?
I think it's all of the above, but I think it's the education and training component that really benefits the city. Whether it's the Boston public school system, for the business community to be successful, we need a Boston public school system that is educating and training our students. The University of Massachusetts program under Marty Meehan works well. Is there a pipeline for BPS students to get into UMass Boston and these other colleges and universities throughout Greater Boston? There is no better nursing program, in my opinion, than the UMass Boston program. Are we able to get students from BPS into the UMass Boston nursing program and then into these hospitals and colleges and universities right in downtown and in other areas of Greater Boston? That's the challenge, but the challenge really is educating our young kids early in the Boston public school system, and we can't abandon them or throw up our hands and say the system's not working. We must, for a strong Boston and a vibrant Boston, have a school system that works for everybody.
The issue I see on that line of the school system is letting families and the children, the students, know that these opportunities exist and that these opportunities are within their reach. I don't think sometimes families and the students, whether they're immigrants or modest means, have a sense that they're open to them or available or within their reach. And I think we have to encourage them that they are. And that's a two-way street. That's the businesses doing it, the city doing it, but also the families reaching out as well. It's not easy. People don't look at it and say, I could never do that. No one in my family's done it. How could I do that? But to encourage them that you can.
Mm-hmm.
You can. And how that's a real tough job. That's a real tough job. I had a couple of issues that I called them our lightning round, but we're getting near the hour. But I talked, you covered housing as being very important, and the issue of rent control is now back on up in the legislature. Any comments you want to make about rent control, Mr. President?
Yeah, Bill, there should be some type of assistance for longtime residents, especially the elderly, that they're not priced out of the city, whether it's supporting the elderly on some type of program, rent control program, rent assistance program, seniors or persons with disabilities or veterans. There has to be a place in Boston for those residents. They help build our city. They've been here during the difficult times, the tough times. There has to be a place for them during the booming times as well.
Okay. The Globe supports the real estate transfer fee, and the city council supports that, of course. And did you support that?
I supported that. Some of that funding, if it passes up at the State House, can be used towards affordable housing in the city, but also to sustain and support residents that are struggling also to stay in their current location. So I've had discussions with Sheila Dillon, who's the chief of housing for the city, and I think it's an important tool for the city of Boston. Certainly, no one wants to raise taxes, but we have a major challenge on keeping residents into the city. Maybe that might be a tool for residents to stay in Boston as well.
A big issue in the city, the Globe did a series on it this week, or an article, is the climate, the sustainability and the resiliency. I know it's a big topic, but I think you would agree we have to be aware and sensitive, even when it comes to development, about the impact on our climate and sustainability here in the city, particularly here in the waterfront.
That's right. Down in the Seaport area, Fort Point, a lot of development is taking place. We see during storms that even the Moakley Courthouse is at times underwater. The aquarium train stop is also impacted during major flooding. So, you know, when we're doing development projects, it's also critical to address climate resiliency measures and what impact the climate will have on development, on neighborhoods. You know, I was talking to the Boston Water and Sewer Director today, Henry Vitale, about this issue. And, you know, it's critical when we do development projects that climate resiliency issues are part of the discussion.
A big issue for us in the city is, you know, is transportation. You know, several ways. One is public transportation, its accessibility and so forth, but also just the congestion and in transportation within the city and how we address that. And what are your thoughts on any of the transportation issues?
Yeah, I've focused a lot, Bill, on pedestrian safety as well. Our streets, many of our streets and sidewalks are not safe. I think the current speed limit of 25 miles an hour is reckless and too fast in many neighborhoods of Boston. Very difficult for people to cross the in the crosswalk, especially if you're a senior, persons with disability. We need to invest also in our MBTA to make sure it's working for workers coming into the city so that they can get to their job. I have a lot of business owners that call me up and say that their workers are often late coming into Boston because of challenges with the MBTA. So those are concerns, those are challenges. We need to do a better job, but we can't just rely on people commuting into the city via the vehicle. We have to have an MBTA system that works.
Yeah. Well, I just see the bus system, the bus line in your district, you know, in South Boston, that those buses are packed every day. So I know you've tried to get more buses on that line there, and I know the mayor is pushing the free bus line in Roxbury and part of Dorchester. So, yeah. I always end these discussions, Mr. President. We are, believe it or not, we are at 1 o'clock. Offering, is there anything that you want to end on? Anything that I didn't cover? We covered a lot of things, and there were more that I didn't get to. But I wanted to turn it over to you, and I usually take that question and ask it with a question of hope. You know, during the pandemic, I ended all these discussions, as you know, with, are you hopeful about the future? Hopeful about the future of all of us in the city. So as we end this hour, I turn it over to you. If there's anything on your mind that you would like to share with us, and if you could also address the question of what you're hopeful about.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm a positive person. I have great faith and confidence in the residents of the city and our city government and the business community. It's about working together. It's about being disciplined and being accountable. You know, we're looking at the situation now in Ukraine. You know, we've had a tough road over the last 2 years. We have tough times ahead of us as well. But it's about working together, respecting each other, listening. Listening is important. We don't do that well in government or in society at times, and we want to lash out at people that we disagree with. But government doesn't have all the answers. A lot of the answers come from residents, from the business community, from nonprofits. But it's about working together, treating each other with respect, treating each other with dignity. And I think that's the key part of it, is being more understanding, being more empathetic, but also being accountable for our actions and being disciplined. And I mean, when I mean being disciplined, is, you know, there might be some pain in society or in government and in the business community or in our neighborhoods, but that pain can make us stronger and make us a healthier city, in making sure that our city works for everybody. And a strong Boston is what we want, because a strong Boston is educating our children and putting food on the table for families. So that's exactly what the city needs, is us working together. So I'm honored to be with you today, Bill, and I really want to say thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity.
Well, listen, I want to thank you, Mr. President, for your kindness and friendship over the years in your family. And I want to thank everybody who has joined us today. And we accomplished what I had intended, was just to provide an opportunity for you in your new perch and your new duties and responsibilities as president of the council to put on the table your priorities. And I want to thank you for that. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today.